by side, we back.
There you go. Come closer. Hello.
Hello.
So here's who are you?
Rabbit.
Rabbit?
Rabbit.
This is new to me.
It's fairly new. It's fairly
Okay.
new.
My friends are like the Raven. You don't even know who I'm talking about, and yet it is someone you know. See my dilemma?
Yeah. It
So
happens. I know
okay.
Omni Raven.
Okay, Rabbit. So you're here on at the vigil. Well, why?
Um, Firstly, because it seems to be the last great bastion of activity in Occupy Portland. Secondly, because as the sexual assault survivors advocacy group that grew out of Occupy Portland and the need created by Occupy Portland, we see this as like an at-risk community that really needs our help.
Thank you. Now you guys responded to a specific kind of emergency request. Hi there.
Hi. Does anybody have a light?
I'm afraid not. Oh, actually, I do.
Oh!
Just raise it up. No, no, no,
Oh,
no.
raise this
Raise it up. Just from the edge.
Oh, man.
Check it out.
Thank you.
Um,
Well, don't let it go out.
Here we
Maybe.
go. We'll do this.
Let it go.
I'll get your cigarette all waxy.
Yeah, but
Okay,
Nice.
for the tobacco
you
dust.
might want to empty some of the wax out, and then it'll stay
Maybe.
lit longer.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, take care, man.
What are you guys doing?
We're here with Occupy Portland demonstrating for housing justice, and right now I'm doing an interview of my comrade here.
Oh, okay.
Comrade.
I got
We're
that
gonna be so,
from
we're
I
gonna be
got
so
that from
oppressed.
I got that from Josh.
I like saying comrade. It's
he
been
calls
growing
me-
on me lately.
Yeah, he calls me comrade.
Dirk from P-Luck's been calling people comrade around me lately, and it's catching on.
Yeah, you know what I call this? Occupancy as opposed to occupation. I feel like it's less oppressive feeling. I think occupants as opposed to occupiers. I like that because it's still occupy. I don't lose the brand name occupy, but I like occupant because we share the city, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to exclude others, but I am definitely standing my ground. Anyway, that was a Jimmy thing.
Jimmy. Oh, Jimmy. I like Jimmy.
Jimmy Yellow Raincoat, who interviewed me on KBOO, and that was really, really fun. I put a link on the Twitter. So okay, where were we?
Why?
Twitter,
Existential.
which is OPDX Vigil TV, one word. If you guys go on Twitter. Okay, so Rabbit, I
Me.
put a call out asking for groups to fill in. We had an emergency need for today, and you guys came forward and filled a need in less than 24-hour notice, and I'm really grateful. So, and also Tequila was making signs, and I guess that has really.
Paperclip chain.
Oh,
Well.
tell about the paperclip chain.
So today we made a chain of 2,000 paper clips to represent the low estimate of there being 2,000 houseless folks on the street every night here in Portland. So there's a paperclip down here at City Hall chained together to show our solidarity for each houseless person in the city. So
And that doesn't count couch surfers or people in shelters, but
people
just
on
the
the street.
physical on the street, and could be up to 3,500. I've heard.
Yeah,
So, it's a visual.
yeah,
That's
that's the low end estimate.
Yeah, but you know, it's kind of like when. Do you remember for the Black Friday? It'll recover. It just has to keep burning. Remember for Black Friday how mostly Gina, I was part of it initially, but she really pulled it together for the vigil around the tree lighting.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to have candles um, with people who were houseless if they could join us because the idea was light for life.
Right.
So to give some clue about people, you know, souls and care.
Using the light to give visibility to what seems like an invisible
Visibility,
problem.
yeah, and warmth.
Yeah.
compassion. And this paperclip is another kind of, hey, these are people. Like it may be just a paperclip, but you know, it's a
It's a
person.
physical representation of something most people choose to ignore.
Yeah, there's a veterans memorial where people print their names, and this is you know, a vigil, and
Right.
type of thing. And anyways, beautiful. Did Tequila come up with the idea, or did you guys come up with it together? or-
Tequila borrowed the idea from, I think, a group of high school students who put together 6 million paper clips to represent survivors, or like victims of the Holocaust.
Okay, Holocaust. That's amazing. And that was just Jews. 6 million doesn't count.
I'm not sure.
It doesn't.
It doesn't?
They killed a whole bunch more people. Yeah. There was an estimate that Stalin actually executed 10,000 people.
Something like
But-
10 million.
Well, here's the thing. The 10,000 was the ones that he was present at or fired the gun himself. So I heard that 10,000, I was like, wow, there's a lot of people. And they're like, no, he had, we say 10 million people executed,
Yeah.
but he actually personally pulled the trigger or ordered, stood there for 10,000. That's a full-time job.
That is a full-time job. Stalin was a busy man.
Yeah. So we have people dying from homelessness. It's a fatal
ostensibly.
condition.
Yeah.
Not necessarily right away. Definitely unseen. I don't think people connect the dots. Like it took a long time for people to connect the dots between smoking before we
Right.
even knew about cancer, But how do you think people are at risk? Because you deal with at risk. So first of all, sexual assault. What do you know about like homelessness and sexual assault?
So something like 94% of women struggling with homelessness incur sexual assault over the course of their lifetimes.
94%.
94%. And so even outside of houseless communities, it's estimated that about 1 in 4 women is sexually assaulted. We can reason then that I have a fairly decent sized family. I have 3 sisters. I have a grandmother, and for me, I can directly relate those kind of statistics to out of say my grandmother or my mother or my 2 sisters. That means odds are one of them is affected. And so it's a very personal issue. I feel for everyone. It's not a women's issue. It's 1 in 33 men is raped at some point in their lifetime. That's a statistic that doesn't get talked about. And I don't know what the exact statistics are, but I'm sure you can multiply that for people who live on the street. There's some intersection there between the fact that many homeless people, about a fifth of the houseless population, is queer, and queers are also more at risk for sexual assault. So you can sort of stack those up and see that there's some extra extra risk there for those people, as well as the mentally ill are likely to incur that sort of violence. So the houseless community has a lot of different groups converging into one dangerous position, and so it's important that we stand as community to confront that.
So now, I guess there's 2 issues. There's the fact that you have vulnerable populations to begin with, and then you have their situation on top of that.
Right.
What makes a person at risk just by being outdoors and it's kind of obvious, okay, they're outside, but it's deeper than that, I believe. There's probably
Well, there's a lot of factors. Most people, I live my life sort of under this ideology that nothing happens for no reason. And so, first of all, most of the people that become houseless become that way for some reason. And it's not their fault, but, they're already, singled out due to their class status or their sexual orientation or gender identity, um, their race or mental illness, and all these factors are more likely to put people on the street. Um, and so like you have all these like culminating things that put people at risk even before getting out on the street, or like you wouldn't have ended up on the street if you weren't already at risk. Um, so
Hi, Holland.
so it's important to note that um, once you're already out on the street, of course, like you have no walls to protect you. You have no privacy. A lot of times, there's no community protection, but also there's no education around practicing good consent. Um, there's no like it's really hard to build community in an area where there's so much scarcity. So like when you're dealing with houseless populations, it's a very like there's a lot of scarcity dealt with, and so like that creates a hard environment to build a sense of community and togetherness in, and I think that helps to put people at risk. But then I think it's largely just this sort of I think it's a side effect of being largely ignored and neglected.
When you hear a car pass, it amplifies.
Right.
So just wait. It's our commercial break. And I just want to say greetings to Holland. Thank you, viewer.
Hi, Holland.
That's
Um,
exciting.
I
Okay.
think, yeah, I think it's important to note that, um, like when you've been neglected and had society's back turned on you, there's a very different culture that arises in that sort of scenario, and I think that itself, like the feeling that nobody cares, leads to um, like certain behaviors being more accepted, and I think that's largely like all of these problems are like the fault of like the people who aren't houseless in the same way that like racism is the fault of like it's not the fault of people of color, it's the fault of people perpetuating racism. um,
Okay, so we're talking about a second subject, which is a lot of people blame the victim. That is an epidemic. With our houseless population, people blame the victim and they have no idea what these stories are, which is why we have Vigil TV. And I try off air to showcase some of the better interviews more than like the silly stuff we do. Like I arm wrestled some
Yeah.
guy and woke people up. I mean that that kind of stuff. When you see on Vigil TV, when you say interview with so and so, chances are there's something about a person's story that will lessen the widespread assumption that somehow this is their fault and they're different than me, that they have a single type of story. It's probably drugs or bad choices and laziness, mental illness. Those may be the case, but the people who are coming to us are predominantly folks who have, and I think we'll see this more and more in the United States right now with this epidemic, is they're predominantly people who have one bad thing happen
right.
where they fall through the cracks in the Liberty Bell. I mean, they just totally, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, the United States has all of these protections and all this way of life, unless something bad happens to you, and then, you just get sifted to the bottom,
Right.
and people fall very, very quickly. And I don't remember a time before where going from, having hard times financially meant that the next two steps from that is that you're at risk of dying on the street. That's a new thing. I mean, it went very quickly from your hardships or problems, or you're at risk. But now it's almost a given that if you have a risk, then you're going to have all these compounding factors, and suddenly, just bad things just happen over and over, and you'll be on the street. I mean, it's way too fast of a trip.
Yeah, I don't know that this is entirely unprecedented in American history. I think the same sort of thing happened in like during the Great Depression. But I think that one thing that's important to note
Ah.
is the the general shift that's happened. Like people like to compare the Occupy Wall Street movements to the civil rights movement. And the interesting thing about that is that, like, in the civil rights movement, what drove people to get involved in a lot of those situations were like the survival pending revolution programs of groups like the Black Panthers. We're talking like outreach programs that like provided some people with something that they need, like free breakfast and free medical clinics. But what's interesting that we're seeing going on here is that like the context of American life has changed, and so like to draw people in at this point, like the situation is so dire that to draw people in at this point, all we're providing here is a space where people won't be kicked awake in the middle of the night, and that in itself like is impetus enough to bring people in.
Isn't that amazing?
Which, you know, is something that is all too easy to take for granted, but like the fact that for some people is a reason to band together, you know, shows you just how dire the situation in America really is.
Right, and the Portland Business Alliance pressure to City Hall to have the cops wake people up everywhere in the middle of the night, roughly, and disorienting, especially if they're sleep deprived or hungry
Right.
or, you know, whatever. And then, you know, if they resist or are mouthy or don't even know it's a policeman at that point,
Right.
which has happened a lot. I saw it happen to a little kid where his hair was ripped out from his head. You know, that happened at Shemansky. He was
Oh, yeah.
awakened. He was
I
awakened.
was there that night.
Oh,
Goodness.
he was awakened. There's some sprinklers. He was awakened by a police officer, you know, shining a light, but he was in his sleeping bag, and they get up.
Yeah.
And that's how they get awakened, is get up, and kicked a little bit,
Mhm.
you know, nudged with the foot.
That,
Well,
that
on
morning
the
was more than a
street,
nudge.
yeah. But that's on the street, that nudge could be somebody there to rob you, to rape you, who knows?
Yeah.
So if you're in a sleeping bag and you know, or you're in a dead sleep, and then to have you respond with being mouthy or, you know, whatever, making you go to jail. You know, this is a serious risk. So I guess, I mean, Matthew was saying he practically has to sleep with one eye open anyway.
Right.
So they're sleep deprived. They are seriously sleep deprived. And like you say, the fact that people would come here just to a sidewalk,
Yeah.
as opposed to like under a bush or in the dirt or wherever, you know, they might be able to find something in Forest Park or up by Gateway or something, but they're not. They're downtown because they need city services, or they're getting a job and looking at the library or whatever. So they're downtown, and they're looking for just a place where they won't be stopped from sleeping. And what bothers me is that they're happy once they're pushed into the darkest alleys of crime and isolation. So that is one way this is a fatal condition, and there's other
Right.
ways. There's violent crime, but there's also stepping on needles, because some of the areas of town that they get shuffled to, you know, there's hey, can you think of any way that just by being outside living that you are at risk of death over time?
Well, I mean, the worst part about it, I mean, is the most direct when you look at the number of homeless deaths that we've had in Portland over the last few years. People, you know, deliberate acts of violence, murder. They pulled a body out of the river. I mean, I've only been here 3 weeks, and I've heard of a number of people. But
So-
also
There was
there's
the drive-by under the Morrison not long ago.
Yeah, and that was kind of an internal thing, or they knew, but mistaken identity or whatever, but they were going for a particular person. There's also hate crimes taking place of poisoning, you say? Like, wasn't that the case with the body in the river?
Yeah, you know, that's the thing is there's no, there doesn't seem to be any outreach to get that kind of information to the community as far as, you know, how they're at risk. Now, sometimes in on-campus situations, you know, campus public safety has to try and circulate information about the risk factors and stuff like that. But for the homeless people, they should just get jobs and just end all their risk concerns.
Yeah.
It's another prime example of blaming the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing I really love about, well, one of the many things I really love about this demonstration at City Hall is that it's calling attention to something that even if it's being screamed about, nobody's paying attention to. And it reminds me of this. I think it was Audre Lorde. This Audre Lorde quote about how if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say that you enjoyed it. So we're making sure that no matter what happens to us, to anybody in our community, they can't say that that we never spoke up. We were here, and we're making that impression.
Right, right. So the fact that we had a couple who heard about this place, and I've heard that several times, but what they said, the video on the Vigil TV from Donnie and Lori was that they heard it was this wonderful place where you could get some support and people were beautiful and, oh my God, hi Jeffrey,
Hey,
doing an interview.
yeah.
He's been one of an interview with Jeffrey, ladies and gentlemen. So anyway, they heard about this place, and they said, oh, it was everything that we were told it would be. And we brought a couple friends, people I woke up. Oops, so much for everything they heard it would be. But, we all make
Right.
mistakes. But anyway, they probably are back in bed now. But anyway, yeah, so they were very happy, but what does that say to me? Okay, if word is getting out that it's not just a place you can go, but a beautiful place, and then you're having them tell their friends and bring them.
Yeah.
My thought is, this is that moment where I can just kind of feel that wave coming.
Right. Well, and I think anyone who's been watching Vigil TV knows that that sidewalk over there is just a bunch of people in sleeping bags on hard concrete, and some people to talk to. And I think that if something that basic is considered a paradise, then that sort of underscores the situation that the houseless people of Portland are in. Because
Yeah, that's
if
horrifying.
that seems so great, someone who grew up in a cushy home, it's like, oh, look, these people sleeping on a sidewalk. But somebody who's out there roughing it every night, the fact that seems really attractive should go to show just how rough things are.
Right. And another thing neat about Occupy Portland involvement is the camp, we were equals, and you didn't need to know what somebody's socioeconomic status is.
Right.
We just all worked together and took care of one another. And so I was quite shocked when camp disbanded and found out that 50% of my friends were houseless, because these were just activists to
Right.
me. And they were my heroes for holding the camp, because the camp, the physical occupation, made the movement to which we're based, and we have some, culture that will continue. So,
Right.
so I started participating out of, gratitude for my comrades, just like I was a daytime supporter of the campers. But now, wow. Now we have a lot of people who have not been part of the Occupy Portland movement, or they have, but they never saw the camp, or they came from a different city, Occupy, So what we're doing when we share, and when we have outside support, giving things and helping,
Right.
that's probably foreign in some cases.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how many people, for every demonstrator, how many people do you think have participated in helping at one point or another?
I think that's largely impossible to even, make an educated guess at.
Yeah. We are in several hundred I mean, at least 300 people that I have seen spend the night.
Right.
I mean, that's hard for me to believe. But I'm serious. I have taken some note, and 3 months ago we were at a couple hundred, and it's growing very quickly.
Right.
They've come and gone, or they come periodically, or they come for just the night. But you know, that's just people spending the night sleeping on the concrete.
Right.
But all the people who come light a candle, or the people who bring some food, or wash laundry, or whatever, make a donation on the website. There's a lot. there's, I mean, there's probably 3 people for every person
I'm
that
sure.
has spent the
Yeah.
night. So, plus we've had some participation from different working groups, like Major. Anyway, it was really cool that you guys came on a moment's notice, literally, to fill that need, to represent some activism and some community service and education, because it's I'm serious about it. I think it's going to fill the block within the week. I could be wrong, but when they told me that they were telling their friends, because they'd already heard it was the place to be,
Right.
and we're talking about a life and death situation, you know, where the one thing that they can't get is sleep and you know, safety, and here it is, I'm thinking they're all coming.
Well, I think it's important to underscore the difference between what I see a lot of like more established nonprofit groups being, which is like people who organize because they care, or people who organize because they think it's like the right or moral thing to do, and then you have folks like these for whom organizing is like a necessity to stay alive. And I think that like when you really understand the difference that is, you understand that like the more people who come here because they have to, like this is going to be a real force to be reckoned with as far as like creating positive change, because a lot of people do their activism and go home. This
Yeah.
group can't do that. You
Right.
know, it's life or death for them, like you said. And I think that creates an entirely like you cannot understate that difference, or cannot overstate that difference when you're talking about what that means as far as building capacity to like take agency over your situation and really change things.
Well, that's another thing that reminds me of the civil rights movement, whether it's, you know, women, African American, you know, just general people of color, or any diverse, you know. Now we have so many different groups, queers, LGBTQ. God, how many people have been, you know, slowly having to fight for civil rights? This seems to be another marginalized population, um, that is not defined by something arbitrary like skin color, which they've said is so genetically complex they wouldn't even call it genetic anymore.
Right.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, that's really arbitrary.
Yeah,
But
it's completely marginal.
yeah, so here's something that is a physical separation of people that's major, like a major difference between somebody who has a roof over their head and someone who doesn't, as far
Yeah.
as their situation.
Well,
So
I think it's important to note though the way that those other struggles uh, play a part in and lend themselves to the struggle. You know, because people from those communities are more likely to end up being a part of this community. Um,
they also then have some, in some cases, some experience with activism for, and what I was gonna add is we have houseless people advocating for themselves, and we have housed people in solidarity with them who
Right.
don't want them to be alone in this. And that sounds very similar to me to civil rights movement, where predominantly it was run by the people who wanted those rights established and understood by everyone, but it was also supported very much by other people in solidarity. It wasn't just their issue. It's our society.
right.
What kind of society do we want? You know, so here it's a beautiful thing to see And I know we're not the first demonstration where houseless people have, stood up for themselves.
Well, and I think it's important to note, and I sort of mentioned this earlier, but like another similar thread is that like when we're talking about like people organizing themselves, it's important to note too that um, like in the civil rights movement, like it's important to notice that like racism isn't perpetuated by people of color. In the same sense, like houselessness isn't perpetuated by those without houses. It's perpetuated by the more wealthy folks who either like systemically keep those people down and out of houses. When we're talking about like the banks and the corporations, and even like state institutions, like the police, but also through the inaction of folks who have resources and sort of like blind themselves to the issue because Survivor's on and it's easier to
Survivor.
just tune out.
We should get those. What do they call those? The bandana. They had a name for the things that Survivor colors. They get a bandana type thing. We should get those. We could call it Survivor. No, that's a bad idea.
Might be. Is that show even still on? I don't know how topical that is.
Yeah, Survivor still has new seasons.
Does it really?
That's too bad.
Because they could do
Sad.
Survivor here in Portland.
Survivor Portland.
Survivor Portland, Oregon.
Two
There's a
camps would be
rat.
The Vigil and Red Dream 2.
Yeah.
But the last thing we need to be is pitted against each other.
Yeah, we don't want to be pitted against each other.
Which is how the government structures services for the houseless. It's like we have 1,500 service slots available, houseless people, so you wrestle among yourselves who's going to be first in line at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we have 600 shelter beds for you 2,000 or 3,000 homeless people, so you figure out how you're going to compete for those beds. So it's already Survivor Portland.
Wow. Did you guys
without the
get
cash
any
prize.
weapons?
Yeah.
Do they give you weapons like sparring sticks or anything to get those beds?
Well, it is actually the
Is
same.
it
There's
Thunderdome?
manufactured, contests. How long can you stand in the rain at TPI or the Union Gospel Mission? To wait
You
for
should
your
come
food.
over for a second with
Come,
Ben.
Charles. You can even hold the
Interview with Charles.
I'm back. Sorry,
Interview
people.
with Charles is a very good interview.
Represent.
So the contest. Describe the contest. Hold on for a second. Just a second. I'm gonna break this into 2 segments. Okay.